I don't need the brick. I don't want the brick. I want to try and figure things out before I get the brick in the head.
How do you leave safety for something that feels a little bit more risky?
You jump out of an airplane. People can try and mask things, but when you're in the presence of a horse, nah. You can try and mask as much as you want, and they're going to just come right into your core and be like, this is what's really going on with you. Rather than shriveling up, ask the question, why is this happening?
Right.
What lesson do I need to learn here? What door is going to open? And you're right, doors did open for you.
Welcome to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast for midlife women who are ready to rewrite the rules and create their kick-ass next chapter. I'm Jennifer Arthurton, and each episode we dive into reinvention, resilience, and unapologetic pursuit of your best chapter yet. Because midlife is not the beginning of the end, it's simply a new beginning. Let's dive in. Today, we are going to be talking with Sue Willoughby, who is a coach for women over 40 who are in the process of radical personal change. And what we're going to be talking about is a topic that you all know as near and dear to my heart, is why midlife is actually the perfect time for radical personal change. I believe this with my whole heart. I know my guest does too. So welcome, Sue Willoughby, to the show.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I have to say, I'm thrilled to be here, and I love the name of your podcast because we do, all chicks do know shit.
We know some shit.
Whether I like to think of myself as old or not, I am where I am in life, and I'm rolling with it.
You know, it's funny. Not often, but I do have people every once in a while say, why are you calling us old? Why are you calling us old? And I'm like, okay, you've missed the point here. Like, we're not old, but that people call us old. So we're just going to roll with it. But what we know is more important than our age anyway. So
absolutely. Yes.
So I know you have had a very interesting life journey. Like, you've had many ups and downs and turns and pivots and reinventions along the way. And I would love for you to just share a little bit of kind of your story of, navigating these transitions, because for people who haven't done that regularly in their life, transitions can feel like a really, really big thing. Mm-hmm. And, when I hear stories like yours, like, they're very inspiring because it's like, oh, look, you can do this and then you can do this. And, so share us a little bit about your life journey and how you got to doing what you're doing.
Oh, my goodness. I would be happy to. Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, as you mentioned, it has been a lot of, pivots and all that stuff. And pivot is such a key term that we all use these days. Mm-hmm. And it's very fitting as well. I think that a lot of my pivots came from just growing up in a very uncertain household and kind of not knowing what to expect next, and being flexible and just being like, okay, this is what's happening now. And so I'm going to have to deal with what's happening now. And I'm referring to growing up with an alcoholic parent. And it makes you very, okay, what am I going to walk into? What am I going to be presented with now? And, being resourceful, being independent, sometimes not always in a great way. And, I had to do a lot of finding my own path without a lot of, I'd like to say, without a lot of adult supervision. It's not that I was completely out there winging it by myself, but a lot of times I was. I mean, my mom was dealing with her own stuff, and that kind of left me to emotionally and figure things out, and also personally. But I think it also made me stronger and more resilient, and less afraid to try new things, because that's what I was constantly doing. And without that guidance, I didn't always make the best choices, but I made choices. And I think that is huge, to just make a choice, just jump in. And I think, like you're saying, why is midlife the best time to do that, is because so many women just feel like they don't have that option, or they don't know how to make a choice or whatever. But, I sort of fell into various careers for whatever reason, whether they were easy or not. I had a pretty big transition in my mid-30s. I moved cross country. Someone gave me the opportunity to do that, and I grabbed it. And I think that has made the biggest change and the biggest opportunity for me to reinvent myself in a really, really positive way. I had the opportunity to go back to school. And I mean, in my third, I actually quit high school twice. So I'll be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
And not once, but twice. I got my GED instead. I just didn't feel like I belonged there, and I had to get out. I was bored. I was not being challenged. So I went out and, I worked a lot. So when I moved cross country, I had the opportunity to actually pursue secondary education. And I went back to school, and I actually appreciated it and enjoyed learning and enjoyed being challenged. Got into a whole new career in tech, which really lifted me up to a different level that I never thought I would be at, financially and emotionally and professionally. But I still have that restless entrepreneurial spirit. And while I was working in tech, I started a couple of businesses on the side. And so I always had that sort of entrepreneurial hustle going on in the background. And I just, one thing sort of led to another. I go through life, being aware of opportunities. And when something presents itself, I jump in, I take it. If it's, something that I'm interested in or I want to just learn more about, it doesn't mean that I have to do it for the rest of my life. But I love just trying new things, meeting new people, just learning and experiencing life. That's kind of where I'm at.
Right. Okay, so you've had a very varied career. So, you were in tech, you've been a stand-up comedian, you've been a DJ, now you are a coach working with horses. And we're going to dig deep into that one because I'm super fascinated by that. But so these opportunities present yourself. So let's take your, moving on from your tech career, for example, many of us, myself included, and people listening, it's like, you've had this career that has treated you really well. It's given you a lot of, financial support, resources, all of that kind of stuff. Leaving that can feel very, very risky. It's like, I remember leaving my career going, oh my God, am I ever going to make that much money again? Like, will I ever actually really be employed? Because all I knew was corporate, right? Like that was what's drilled into me from the time that I was a kid, was get a good job, work your way up the ladder until you retire, right? So making the change to leave that secure foundation that we've been told is the savior of our lives can be challenging, even though we know we might want to explore different parts of ourselves, different businesses and things like that. So how do you leave safety for something that feels a little bit more risky?
You jump out of an airplane.
I knew you were going to say that. You just put on a parachute and jump out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I kind of multitask. I had probably a 25 plus year career in tech as an instructional designer and trainer in corporate America. And my last 10 years was spent at a large aircraft manufacturer in flight training. And while it sounds sexy and fascinating, I was surrounded by a lot of people that had been with the company for a very, very, very long time and were never going to leave. And I was always feel like I was coming up against that. Well, we don't do it that way. Well, we're, so I'm like, oh my God. All right. Geez. I mean, it's like turning a battleship or a 747 in this case. But I found myself surrounded by that mentality, and I just could not do it anymore. So I'm also a private pilot. I'm not current, but I swore I'd never jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And I had already gotten my real estate license, and I was practicing real estate part-time as an investor. So all of my investor buddies were like, hey, you keep saying you're going to go skydiving with us. So I'm like, all right, fine. And I did it. It was so freeing. I'm not recommending it for everyone because, it's not for everyone, but it was such an amazing experience. It was just very symbolic and metaphoric, whatever you want to call it, to just like, okay, I had already planned to leave my corporate job and walk away from a 6-figure income and all the benefits and all that stuff. It is scary. right? It is scary. It's like, it literally feels like jumping out of an airplane, because it's like, what if the chute doesn't open? Now I had, some big dude strapped to my back, so that I was pretty confident that he was going to get us to the ground, in an organized manner. But just being up there and looking out at the expansive world below, it was incredible. I think it can open you up. You have to take the lid off, right? You have to take the lid off, let some fresh air in, just poking a few holes in the top is a start, but, climb out of the jar and just be like, what? You can see stuff on the other side of the jar, like the mime, right? Trying to get out.
Yeah.
But just take the lid off, let some fresh air in, explore some opportunities. You don't have to just quit, have a plan. And I think it's really good to have 100%. A plan and a blueprint. I mean, that's, don't just do it willy-nilly. But then I transitioned into real estate full time. So I already kind of had my feet on the ground there. So it was a transition. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, because, the safe route will always be safe, but there is also a cost to that. Like, we feel like it's going to be safe, but there is a cost to that. And maybe it's not super apparent to us in that moment, but for me, like, I did the much less riskier version of jumping out of the airplane, like the much less. When I left corporate, one of the things that I decided I needed to do was to open my mind to possibility. Like, what else is possible? Because I had grown up 30 years in that. That was all I knew. It was all I could see. So I started going out and having coffee with as many different people as I could from as many different walks of life, just to see, like, why do you do what you do? How do you do what you do? What do you love? What do you not love? And through those conversations, and people introduced me to other people. And I did this for probably over a span of about 3 months. And the doors that opened in my mind was like, okay, they can never be closed again. And it's the same example, I think, of you, like the whole world opening up, as you're falling from the sky. It's the same thing. Once you open those doors, you can't close them. Right. And
exactly. Yeah. Once you're aware of what's out there, you can never go back in the jar.
You can't go back in the dark. And that's when you start to see the cost of remaining the same, staying in what, and I'm air quoting this for those of you listening, like in the safe place, because yes, it's safe, but there is a cost to that. Right.
Absolutely.
So how did you go from then, and maybe this wasn't quite the jump though, from real estate to DJ and comedian?
That was early on. That was before, that was back in my younger days, where I in my high school yearbook, where you have to write what your goals were. Now, I have 2 high school yearbooks, as you recall. But I think I put something stupid like to be rich and famous. I'm like, what? That's what you think of when you're a kid. Like, that's a cool thing. But I always just wanted to try acting or stand-up comedy. I did some stand-up comedy once I moved to the West Coast. So that was after the move. But prior to that, I was a DJ in clubs and stuff. And it actually got me dates and that was part of the reason I did it. It's like, I'm in the DJ booth. I can talk to who I want to. People look up to you. It was, in my head, I thought that it was a cool thing to do. And same thing with tending bar. I got to meet a lot of people that way. So that was good. And that was sort of my motivation for doing that stuff. And the money was pretty good. It wasn't the healthiest lifestyle. I was a little too indulgent when I was doing that kind of stuff. But we'll just leave it at that. I'm surprised I'm here still. The stand-up comedy, like I said, that I had always wanted to. I've always been like attracted to comedy and stand-up, and it's scary as hell. I'll tell you what, to get up on that stage, and I used to go to open mic nights and pretty much crap my pants, backstage, sitting there in the, in the pit watching everybody else go up, and then it's my turn, and it's like, oh. But it was fun, and once again, it was one thing that just pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I tried it. I have friends that are stand-ups that are successful. It wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted, but I wanted to at least try it. So, Your question was, how did I get to coaching, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And so now you help women over 40 confront their personal obstacles to change the trajectory of their life. And you do this through Equus coaching,
Yes.
which is working with horses. Now, this to me is fascinating because since I was a young child, I mean, I learned to ride when I was 11. I've been fascinated with horses. Like, I'm just very attracted to them. So how did you end up, okay, first of all, how did you get into coaching? And then how did you end up bringing horses into the mix?
Okay. I think my background in training and mentoring and working with teams, it was sort of a natural transition to want to then coach people because I've kind of been doing it my whole career.
Right.
Even when I was in retail, I was in management. And so I was always coaching and mentoring, employees. So that just felt very natural to me. And I have sort of natural leadership tendencies. So the coaching thing sort of came naturally. The horse piece, when I was younger, I found an ad in the newspaper, remember those? For a summer program at a camp for individuals with disabilities. And they needed someone in their coaching or in their horse program. And that was therapeutic riding, but before I even knew what that was. So I would go to summer camp for, peanuts and spend the summer working with individuals that had various abilities and disabilities with mounted horsemanship. And it was really super fun. And I met some amazing people, and they're all still my very close friends to this day. And that was a long, long time ago. So that was kind of my introduction to how horses can be so healing. Plus, I've always had some connection with horses growing up, whether it was riding or usually it was riding. I've never been big into competition, but I loved being around them. I just felt so much better when I was around them, and they got me through some really, dark times in my life without me even really realizing what was happening. So it was once again, I never take the straight route. I always kind of go around the block a few times and down the corner and end up in a dead end. But I wanted to get back into some aspect of working with people and horses in a therapeutic manner. And I started volunteering at a therapeutic riding center. And that got me back into the bug and got me back into riding as well. And then I'm like, you know what? I really just like working with the horses. And is there another way to work with horses and people that doesn't involve riding? And I found a program to learn about Equus coaching, and I got certified as an Equus coach, and then also as a master facilitator, which allows me to do group coaching, so corporate groups, or I'm doing a retreat in October down in California. So it's really more of an immersive kind of 2-day thing. And then I also do one-on-one sessions with people.
So tell me then, how do you bring horses into a coaching session with somebody? So you have somebody who's, in the process of transition, struggling with, how do I get there? What does that look like? What do I even want? Like all of the questions that come up when we're, making a big shift in our life. Yeah. How do you bring horses into that coaching, and what is their role in that coaching?
That's a great question. They act as a feedback loop. That's kind of where it starts. When you are coaching someone one-on-one, and I do one-on-one coaching, not with horses as well, and I bring the equine knowledge and intuition that I have gained over the years into a session, whether a horse is there or not. But when the horse is there, they provide instant physical feedback to what the person is doing, saying, and how they're interacting with the horse. I can then take that information that the horse is giving me, and I can intuit it and then come back out to my client and say, okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. And they're based, and I can be very, very targeted based on what I'm seeing from the horse's interaction with the person. It's amazing. So for example, if the horse is staying away from the person. And whatever their intention is for that session, like I said, I'll have them just like you would with a regular coaching session. What is your intention? What do you want to work on? How can I support you? How can we support you as a team? Because I really act as a team with the horse. So because I know horse behavior so well, I can look at very subtle things that the horse is doing. How are they, turning their ears? How are they, watching the person? How are they getting close to the person? Are they interacting with the person? Are they curious, or are they being very standoffish with the person? And then I can ask the person for their interpretation of what the horse is doing. So for example, if the horse is not coming to them and is staying away from them, the horse is just being a horse, right? Horses take care of themselves because they're prey animals. That their whole existence is about survival, right? So if they're in a situation where they don't feel comfortable, they're going to back off. And they're going to wait for, to assess what's really going on. So that's what they're doing. I mean, they're looking at the person and they're sensing what's going on inside the person, which makes it so powerful because people can try and mask things, usually unsuccessfully, but they may think they're being successful. When you're in the presence of a horse, no, you can you can try and mask as much as you want, and they're going to just come right into your core and be like, this is what's really going on with you. It blows people away.
That is so interesting. So if I'm understanding this right, so correct me if I'm wrong. So you have a person, you have a horse. And you are studying the reaction of the horse, right? And almost have an intuitive connection with that horse. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So through studying the horse's behavior and through your own intuitive knowledge, or connection with that horse, then it leads you to it basically directs the questions that you might have for that person, or the topics that you want to talk about based on something that they said. Is that accurate?
Yep. Spot on with that. Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
And someone may go into a session with an intention that they think that they want to work on. And very quickly, being in the presence of the horse and how they're interacting with the horse and the horse's response, you may peel back a few layers and then get right to the thing that they really need to work on. Right. So they can't, say like, well, I'm trying to think of a good example right now. Like, oh, I'd like to experience more joy in my life. Okay. What does that even look like? Right. So you can start with that. Like, what does that even look like? Well, I want to, maybe I just want to get in there and play with the horse. So, okay, that's what we're doing. Let's just go in and you feel what, see what feels comfortable with you. And now, granted, I've already done a safety demo and showed them how to maneuver around in a safe manner. I don't just be like, okay, go in there with that Clydesdale and have at it. So in the course of them, experiencing joy, they could start crying. Right. Yeah. And so then that gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I see something's coming up for you. Are you okay sitting with that emotion and being in it right now? And if they say no, and if it's something really deep trauma that's being, then we might want to sort of back off. But generally I'm like, okay, let's unpack that. What's coming up for you? And it inevitably brings up so much. And I'm like, okay, let's see why you're not experiencing joy in your life, right? What is holding you back? And then you can kind of really get to the meat of the issue or the meat of their intention and then start from there. So it's pretty powerful.
So the horse is really just a, how do I want to say this? It's like, I want to say tool, but not a tool. It's like a channel. It's like almost opening up a channel in between you and that person. Yeah,
it's a feedback loop, basically.
Feedback loop.
They provide,
that's what you said. Yeah.
They provide really valuable nonverbal feedback.
Yeah.
And the nonverbal is the key.
Yeah, obviously. The talking horse. Yeah.
Mr. Ed.
I think that's so fascinating because I am always super interested in the whole concept of intuition because we have this innate guidance system built within all of us. And 90% of us running around on this planet are completely disconnected from that. And that was like my whole reinvention journey, was about really reconnecting with that guidance system inside me, like to really listen to, well, first of all, learn to listen to, learn to trust, and learn to honor, you know, what was happening inside me. But because we live in a world where, you know, everything happens outside of us, we are validated outside of us, we are compensated, everything happens outside of us, we shut off that inner guidance. And then, so being able to then connect with an animal who has this and is very in touch with their own innate guidance, right? Being able to use that as a tool to be able to facilitate that within ourselves is just, I find that fascinating, like absolutely fascinating that a horse could actually teach us that.
It's pretty stunning. And well, you grew up with horses. You said yourself that you have ridden. And can you think back to a time, I'm going to flip the switch here a little bit, but can you think back to a time when you were with a horse where you may have experienced that very deep connection with them? And what did it feel like?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I used to be, when I was a child, I was a very little child. I was very, very afraid of horses. I mean, they were so huge. I was so small. And then, you know, when I was around 11 or so, I learned how to ride, like my first experience on a horse. And I learned English riding because I lived in England at that point. And so you have to be very in tune with your horse. Like during that process of learning to ride, like what are the signals and the feedback that the horse is giving you, right? In order to be able to do that. And then I ended up having my own horse, which that relationship was so interesting to me that what I learned a lot about, like how smart they actually are, right? And learning to work with them as opposed to forcing them to do something. Because generally we are like I'm going to force and manipulate, but like it didn't work. It just didn't work with a horse, right? So it would be like, oh, okay, I have to work with you and we're doing this in partnership as opposed to I'm going to tell you what to do. So that relationship was really, really interesting to me because, you know, that's what we did. You told horses what to do. You told animals what to do, right? And they did it. And that was the first time it didn't work for me. Right. And, you know, I would have a horse who, you know, if I wanted to ride that day and she didn't want to ride that day, I would get on and she would lean her body with my leg in between her and the barn wall. And she would lean there and like rub my leg on the wall until I got off. Right. And we're like, okay, so we're not doing this today. Right. So it was just very interesting to me to have that feedback. Right. And learn to work with them as opposed to I'm just going to go do what I need to do and you're going to follow along.
Right. And that is the old school method of, you know, the cowboys, right? Just, you know, the horse is broke. They literally would break the horse's spirit and, you know, get them to succumb to their ways. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the horsemanship has changed a great deal with, you know, with natural horsemanship and so forth. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is a partnership. And so during a session, people can create that mini partnership and get a better understanding, not only of the horse, but more importantly of themselves. And the horses also will act as a mirror. Now, maybe your horse was, you know, you thought you wanted to go and ride that day, but maybe you felt obligated to, and your horse was giving you back what, you know, what maybe you really didn't want to be there. Maybe you really didn't want to ride. Maybe you just wanted to groom the horse and hang out and, you know, hand graze it out in the pasture. And the horse is like, yeah, I want to do that too. So let's get off, get off me and let's do what you really came here to do.
And that's exactly what we did most times. It was like, okay, so we're not riding. We're going to just go hang out in the pasture. I'm going to brush you a little bit. And then, exactly.
But they do act as mirrors that way, where they will, you know, give you back exactly what you're, you know, what you're putting out there that you may or may not be aware of.
Yeah. And so have you always been somebody who's in touch with her intuition, or was it something you had to learn?
I think I was in a way that maybe led me to all of those, that presented opportunities to me. I think you're absolutely right when we discount it, and it's not just us that, kind of tamp down our intuition. It is the people around us that, that talk us out of, why are you doing that? Like, well, because I've been called to do it, or something is pulling me in that direction. Like, well, that's a stupid direction to go in. My mother used to tell me that, what do you want to do that for? That's just dumb. You're not doing that. Okay, great. Well, when you have the ability to then actually make your own decisions, that little voice is still in the back of your head. That's a stupid thing to do. Why do you want to do that? Right.
Right.
I because it's presenting itself. That's dumb. The little voice, that's dumb. Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's not going to end well. So I do think that my intuition has always been there. I think that it's gotten more evolved over time, and trusting it more. And I think it's always there. We always know, we feel it in our bodies. And that's the other thing that in Equus coaching that comes up is where is that presenting in your body? It brings people into their bodies because intuition will bubble up inside us physically, right? In some way. And so not only is the coaching session emotional, it's also somatic, right? Where you're in your body, you're grounded, you're feeling the ground, you're present, because the horses use all of their senses all the time, every second of every minute of every day.
Right.
And they teach us to do the same thing, right? You have to have a certain awareness when you're in there with a 1,200 pound animal. So I think awakening all of your senses is also very helpful in getting more in touch with your intuition. So if you get a hit of something, like if you want to explore something, you get an intuitive hit.
Yeah.
Take a minute and be curious. Like, okay, my curiosity is piqued. Why is it, and understanding where it's coming from inside you, and then saying, oh, okay. Oh, that's my intuition. I get it. I'm going to start listening to that a little bit more.
Yeah, that is so true. And I feel like, and tell me if you feel the same way, as we get into this midlife chapter, our intuition comes online much stronger than it's ever been before, right? It's almost like it's really hard to ignore at this point. Like what as they say, you get the nudge and you get the shove and then you get the brick in the head. And this is the time of life, whereas if you are not paying attention, you're going to get the brick that is going to make you pay attention to that inner voice. Like, do you experience that with your clients as well too?
Yeah, that's the brick in the head. That's a good one. It is like, hey, tap, tap, tap. Hello, like you said, and then shove, and then the brick. And I think that is a lot of times why people come to me, because they've gotten the shove, right? And they're like, wait, I don't need the brick. I don't want the brick. I want to try and figure things out before I get the brick in the head, because that's just going to give me a concussion. And so I think you're absolutely right about that. This is the time, because we're at this, and I was talking to someone the other day and I said, what comes into your mind when I say the word midlife? And they just immediately said crisis. I said, exactly. People, and this is somebody that's not in their midlife, but I just said, what is the word? What comes to mind? And they just said crisis, because that's what you hear. Midlife crisis. I have to go buy a sports car. Of course, that's what men like to do. They buy a sports car, do that, date your secretary. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, but I think women have a different approach, right? They might feel like it's a crisis. It might be that brick in the head, right? It's that time when I need to, or get off the pot here, because my life, I want to make the second half of my life count. And I think about that in terms of my coaching, where I'm like the second half coach, right? Where we've all watched those really feel good sports movies where, the team is defeated after the first half. They come into the locker room and the coach is like, you know what you're doing. You have all the skills to do this, get back out. And then of course they go back out there, they win the big game or whatever. My job as that second half coach is like, okay, you're in the locker room right now. You have all the skills in you already that you need to succeed at whatever you want to do. Let's figure out what that is. Let's do some exploration and let's get you back out onto the field so that you can, be in the game in the way that you want to be in the game.
Yeah, that is so true. And I, unfortunately, had to get the brick in the head before I got the message.
Sorry about that.
I say this to all of my clients, to everybody. I'm like, I do not recommend that approach whatsoever. You can take action before you get the brick. In fact, I do it, take action before you get the brick. But sometimes, and I actually consider now that brick in the head is probably one of the greatest gifts I ever got, because would I have willingly blown up my career in my life? I had invested so much to get into it. Would I have willingly, honestly looking back, had the courage to do that? I'm like, I don't think I maybe would have, right? It was very safe, secure, comfy. And being, forced out into, the Wild West and having to figure out the what's next was actually the greatest gift I was ever given, because it allowed me to really, really dig deep and explore who I was and what I wanted and what was important to me, which I probably would never have done that, from my soft, cushy little place, in the corporate world. So it was truly a gift. But if we can recognize that we have this opportunity in front of us, we were never meant to be the same person from the beginning to the end of our lives.
Never.
That was a lie. Somebody told us that somewhere along the way, and it's a complete lie. But to be able to take the opportunity to start exploring ourselves in large and small ways, right? It's so important for our own expansion. It's important for our souls. It's important for our minds. It's important for our physical health. To keep opening those doors, and to your point, getting curious about what's on the other side.
Absolutely. Yes. And you're absolutely right about that brick in the head moment, because sometimes you do need that. And I have had that, and you're like, okay, you hit rock bottom or something, really big happens. And rather than shriveling up, ask the question, why is this happening?
Right.
What lesson do I need to learn here? What door is going to open? And you're right. Doors did open for you, but it was that painful experience. Now, like you said, could you have transitioned out of your career without that brick? Maybe you would not have, right? And you wouldn't be here right now.
Right. Listen, I truly believe the universe gives you exactly what you need.
It's exactly what you need, exactly when you need it.
Exactly,
and like you said,
when you need it.
There's been some little taps before you got the brick in the head.
Well, I remember, long before, leaving my career, I would find myself sitting in meetings in a boardroom, kind of half listening to what's going on and saying to myself, is this it? Is this is this really what I wanted? Is this what I worked so hard for? There has to be more. And then I would shut that voice down, because I'm like, well, I don't know what to do about that. So we're just going to shut the door here, right? Until I couldn't, right? Until I was forced to face that question, right? What's next? And like I said, that was truly a gift. Why do you think that midlife is the perfect time for personal change? I mean, we just talked about some of it, but why do you think it's the perfect time?
I think if you have kind of been the person that has been going along with the flow, right? Like we're trained to do from, the time we're in school, and we still have gained, whether you have a family and kids, you're in a relationship or you're married or whatever, wherever you are in your life, you have to think about, how did I get here? And all of the experiences that you've had to get you where you are. And this is the perfect time, because you have all that knowledge, you have all those tools. Sure, you can always, fine tune those things and get more tools and get more knowledge, but you have so much that you've accumulated by this point of midlife, and whatever that is, over somewhere over 40, right? It could be 50, it could be, whatever. Yeah. You could be in your 60s. It doesn't matter. But you have so much that you can bring to the table and take all of those things. Like I said, you're in the locker room right now. you've got what it takes to get back out there and recreate yourself and reinvent yourself and explore new things. And I think that that's why, so many women, they feel like, oh, well, I've raised my family. I'm at a point in my career. I'll just wait until I retire. And then what? And then fade into the woodwork. Why? This is a time when you should be coming alive. You're like, okay, the kids are gone. I got the house to myself. I got whatever. I'm stepping out. I'm doing new things. I want to take up, windsurfing, whatever it is. It's like, you have the time, you have the knowledge, and if you don't have the time, you can make some time, little tiny blocks of time to go do, fun things, take a painting class or do whatever. You've achieved so much already. You owe it to yourself. And that's why I think that midlife is that perfect time to get back out on the field.
I 100% agree with that. For me along my journey, so my life blew apart in the year leading up to my 50th birthday. So divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and bedridden with a stress-related illness. And, at some point after I threw myself a big old pity party and I wallowed in it for a long time, what's wrong with me and everything. One day I finally realized, I was like, wait a minute, I've got like 35, maybe 40 years ahead of me, God willing. And like, am I just going to sit around and do nothing, like wait for the end for like 35 years? I'm like, how absurd is that, right? And then I realized that was in fact like the longest chapter of my life yet. Like there was no other chapter that's 35 years. And maybe those 35 years are multiple chapters. Who knows? I'm in whatever chapter this is. But the point is that, we live in a culture that tells us that, as soon as you reach 50, it's the downhill slope to old age oblivion. And you just like basically coast into the finish line. Yeah. When the reality is you have a whole lifetime ahead of you to do whatever it is that feels important and meaningful for you. Right. Yeah. And, I wish like growing up, I never past 50 was this vague, blurry, blob of somewhere in there I'm retired or whatever. But I never thought about like, what would I actually be doing? It was just kind of this thing. Right. Yeah. But when you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, like there's a whole lifetime here. Like, what are all the things that I want to do? Like, what do I want to give? What do I want to experience? What do I want to accomplish? Like so much in front of us. And there is so much. Yeah. It's such a gift. My mom passed away when she was 56. Wow. It's such a gift and such an honor to be able to live these years that she never got. Right. And make the most of them. Right. Because we don't know. None of us know. We don't know. We don't know. So life is short and precious, and we are the creator of it. We create our lives, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. It's all on us. We did it.
Just own it. Right. Own it.
Right. But to your point, it's like, take the lessons from it, right? Like, what do I need to learn? Right. Okay. I don't like where I am right now. That was one of the big questions for me. It was like, okay, well, if I created this, I can uncreate this, right? Like I can make it better, which feels somewhat exciting. I mean, a bit scary, but also, wait, I created this, right? Like it's a little humbling, but also powerful in that like, oh, okay, I can create something different now. Like, yeah.
And try not to judge yourself and rate yourself by what you haven't achieved. Look at all the things that you have achieved. Like oh my gosh, I'm here. Like right now, I turned 65 in September. First of all, I'm like, wow, how did I get here again? But then I look back and I'm like, I did all of those things that I did them, with the help of others, the support of others, but mostly by myself in terms of I would have the idea or I would have the, and I created that momentum. I made that change. I took advantage of an opportunity when it presented itself. So like I said, I'm shocked that I'm where I am, but I'm also, when I look back, I'm like, okay, and now I have another 20, 30 years to continue doing a bunch of other cool things because, women are cool. We are cool. We're strong. So cool. We're resilient. Look at all the stuff that we can do. And, we're way more intuitive. We're more in touch with our intuition eventually.
Yeah. We learn it.
And I think, when you reach a certain age, you're like, yeah, I've done some shit in my life, right?
Yeah.
We know shit.
We sure do, right? I make all of my clients create what I call the badass list. And it's
Yeah.
literally a list of all of the things that they have done, accomplished, overcome, challenges, all the thing, just to remind them that, like, read it often and remind yourself, like, look what I have accomplished, right?
Exactly.
Personal, career, everything, right? When you see it written down, I mean, it's in your head, it's one thing, it's very easy to dismiss. When you see it on paper, it's something completely different.
Yeah. I am a badass.
Yeah, exactly. I am a badass, and I was a badass then, and I'm even baddasser now. More badass now.
More badassery is yet to come.
Yeah. So what what have horses taught you about yourself?
Whew, that's a good question. So much. They've taught me awareness. The biggest thing I think they've taught me is patience. And timing. And because when and you kind of talked about that, you can't force horses to do things. You can, it may not end well, right? And that you're going to have a better experience if you understand timing and patience, and also celebration and appreciating the little things. Like, okay, you took a step backwards when I asked you to, because I was, my timing was there or whatever. So I think the biggest things are awareness, patience, and appreciation for the little things, the little wins. You want to, when you're riding or you're around horses, you want to end on a high note. Don't push it, right? That was awesome. We did it. Congratulations. I love you. Big horse. Thank you so much, right? We don't celebrate enough in our own personal lives, our own little things. It's like, whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you want to run a marathon or a half marathon, you walk around the block first, and then you come home and you're like, that was awesome. I walked around the block.
Yeah.
Next time you walk around 2 blocks, whatever it is, be kind to yourself, give yourself some grace, and celebrate those little wins, because they are all really, really important. Like you said, when you're looking at your badass list, there's a lot of little wins that added up to the big wins. And if you don't celebrate them, you're just going to get frustrated and you're going to quit. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Such important things, whether you're a horse person or not a horse person, right? Like awareness, patience, and celebration. I mean, like, if we could all embody those on our journey, because we tend to, like, to your earlier point, we tend to look at what we haven't done yet, right? Versus what it is we have done and the excitement about where we're going, right? Like, if we could embody all of that and, be aware, be patient, and just celebrate ourselves along the way. Like, you can't help but get to where you need to go with the energy of those things. Like, you just can't. Like, it's almost inevitable.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So true.
Yeah. So I think those are, like, incredibly important lessons, like I said, to everybody listening, whether you're a horse person or not a horse person. Incredibly important things to think about in any kind of a transition journey, like wherever it is you're going next, right? Just, amazing.
And awareness, I think, just gets us out of our head and gets us in our body and gets us in our being. And that's why, my coaching motto is, awaken a life worth being, because you are a being and you need to be a being, right? Not just a head bobbing around the world, in your head all the time. We're full whole things. We're whole beings.
We are whole beings. That is so true. One other question I had, and sorry, this just popped back in my head, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Sorry, folks listening. It's the way we roll around here. Talk to me about horses and fear for a second, because I think one of the big thing, we kind of touched on it, and I meant to go there, but I forgot, was we talk about the fear of stepping out, like the fear of getting into your comfort zone. And horses, I think, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, are incredibly sensitive to fear.
Yes.
So what can we learn from horses about fear?
The thing, and you had said when you were a kid that you were afraid of horses because of their size. And the thing that we forget about them, and I always say this, is that they are prey animals. They are 1,200-pound prey animals. So they are prey to someone, to a big cat or whatever. They're going to be a tasty morsel to someone, even though they're big. Horses have a very intuitive fight or flight response, which we do as well. So once again, I think when, we are trying to mask that fear by pushing those things down and not allowing it, fear will turn up in our body. Once again, back to the body. Yeah. It will present itself in some way. Some people, it may just be before you even realize it, it comes up and you're tearing up, right? It comes out as tears, or it comes out as anger, or it comes out as just, totally going into yourself, right? You totally become introverted and just suck yourself in, make yourself really small. Fear can manifest in so many different ways. And I think that with the horses, their fear is on their sleeve, right? They're just like, what is, they'll be walking along perfectly normal, and then they jump sideways and you're not expecting that, or something else. And it's because they've seen something that they don't understand. And it could be the exact same thing that they walked by 100 times, but it could have shifted just a tiny bit. And all of a sudden they're like out of their mind. And then they're like, okay, what is that? Once again, come into your body, right? You build that awareness, come into your body. Okay, it's not a threat. It's not a big deal. Right. I can get beyond this. So I think the way that horses go through those stages of awareness, fear, awareness, do I fight or flight? Typically they're going to run, unless they're stuck in something. But, that they can teach us those same things, because they're going to sense, if you're afraid of a horse and you walk into an enclosure with it and you're afraid of the horse, if you're pretending like you're not afraid, they're going to stay the heck away from you. Right. If you say, I really don't feel comfortable, I feel afraid, whatever. If you can be more congruent with your interior and your exterior, the horse is going to be like, I don't care if you're afraid of me. I just want you to be honest, right? So they can teach you that honesty. And I think if we're honest about our fears, it takes the wind out of their sails. Yeah, you can embrace that. I, work with embracing discomfort. Fear is a discomfort. And how can you embrace that and, diffuse it and get beyond it? Because it's just something that we've built up in our minds. And horses are, everything to them is a real fear, a potential real fear. And then they're like, oh, it was just a plastic bag. Okay, I'm fine. And then they just settle down and they're like, okay, I'm good. They don't dwell on it. We dwell on our fears. We give them stories. We, all of that stuff. Yeah. So I think horses can help us simplify that.
I love that, because it brings us right back around to what you were just talking about, awareness, patience, and celebration, right? So being aware of the fact that, okay, I'm a little afraid, like being patient with myself while I navigate this fear, right? And celebrating myself for that. Yeah, right. And then celebrating myself for taking those tiny steps forward towards the thing that I want, right? Like, oh, so beautiful. I love when things come full circle. It makes me happy.
Yay, we did it.
Oh, Sue, this has been a fascinating conversation. To those of you listening, again, whether you're a horse person or not a horse person, so to the horse people, you're welcome. To the non-horse people, there are so many lessons from, this conversation that I think we can all take on board that can help us on our journeys. And Sue, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing this time.
You're so welcome. Thank you. And this was a really fun conversation.
It was a fun conversation. So to those of you listening, if you like what you heard, go leave us a rating, a review on this episode, or even better, go recommend this to a friend, maybe a horse person or not a horse person. Recommend this episode to a friend. That would be the greatest honor that you could give us. So until next time, thanks for listening to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. If you like what you heard, the greatest compliment you could give us would be to comment below and subscribe. Or better yet, you could share this episode with a friend, a relative, or somebody you think could get something out of it. And remember, midlife is not the beginning of the end. It's simply the beginning of your kick-ass next chapter.